Everyone, welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fallout. Today's episode is all about the Detroit Lions and the Kansas City Chiefs. Before we get you primed for Week 5, let's talk about what happened in Week 4, and let's see if we can make your fantasy football teams any better. All right, so let's get into it, man. Detroit and Kansas City, a lot stronger performance in Detroit than I thought was going to happen. Every time I watch Detroit, I'm more and more impressed. Yes, I know they lost, but this defense really gave Kansas City some fits, which is funny to say because Kansas City put up 34 points. I think 7 were on a returned fumble. That was a questionable fumble. I agreed with the call, but if you're a Lions fan, I'm sure you did not. But man, it didn't look like Patrick Mahomes was ever comfortable. It looked like, Detroit was putting a lot of people into pass coverage and getting enough push in the pocket to where, Mahomes was having trouble getting set and throwing. This Kansas City receiving core, who's like the fastest I've ever seen. I thought they were going to get the dome and really just put on a track meet, a track show. They couldn't really get going. They weren't creating a ton of separation. Now, opportunities were there for them, but Mahomes wasn't hitting them like we've seen. This is probably the worst game I've seen Mahomes play in a while. Outside of maybe that first half of New England football, this is the worst game I've seen in the last, 16 games or 20 games of him starting. Credit Detroit, man. They had a nice game plan, I thought. And I don't really feel like Mahomes was settled the entire game, and the offense still put up 27 points. I mean, this offense is so good. Detroit probably could have, should have, coulda, woulda, shoulda, but they could have come away with this game. Man, credit Detroit. I really liked what Detroit did in this game. Their offense stepped up to the plate as well and took advantage of, some. Let's face it, Kansas City has some weaknesses in that armor of theirs, and passing defense is one of those kind of weaknesses here. But let's talk about Kansas City's performance. 24-42 from Mahomes, 315 yards, 0 touchdowns passing. That breaks the streak for Mr. Mahomes. Another 6 carries on the ground, 54 yards, 0 touchdowns. But the running game for Kansas City finally did well. McCoy, 56 yards, only 11 attempts. Williams, 13 yards on 8 attempts, but 2 touchdowns. So McCoy and Williams had 3 touchdowns between them. But man, goodness gracious. This Kansas City team, I mean, they probably they played what I thought was probably their weakest game that I've seen them play in like the last 2 seasons here, and they still put up 34 points. I mean, they made the plays when they had to, so good for them. Kelsey, 7 receptions, 8 targets. I was surprised. I thought Hardman was going to be used more. McCole Hardman, 5 targets, so he had some opportunities out there, but only 2 receptions and 9 yards for him, no touchdowns. I thought this was a game that he was going to get in the end zone, and he didn't. I'm not put off by him, though. Demarcus Robinson, meanwhile, 4 receptions, 9 targets, 35 yards. You see a lot of these with the Chiefs today because the completion percentage just wasn't there from Mahomes. He was moving his feet. He wasn't set a ton. And again, all credit in my mind goes to Detroit's game plan, and their defensive line was getting a nice push, and the cornerbacks did really well holding up and keeping up with these receivers. They were dialed in. But Patricia, I give him a lot of grief, on some of these segments. Respect to him, man. I think he had a nice game plan, and Detroit almost pulled it off. Now let's talk about Detroit's offense. They finally get Kerryon Johnson off the ground here. 26 attempts, 125 yards, 4.8 yards per carry. That is what Darrell Bevell wants to do with this defense. And it's what I've been seeing with Cleveland and Nick Chubb. It's what I say basically across a lot of these teams with younger quarterbacks, or maybe with, I wouldn't say weak, but these passing attacks. If you have a running back as talented as Kerryon Johnson, or as talented as like a Nick Chubb, or as talented, I'll say this, as Todd Gurley is. I know there's a lot of people down on him. I'm not one of those people. Is in the Rams. You got to utilize that person to open things up in the passing game. Now, Johnson, 26 attempts. Stafford only had 34 throws, 21 of those completions, 291 yards, 3 touchdowns. Kerryon Johnson didn't get into the end zone. That fumble, that could have been called a touchdown. It could have been called a fumble. I don't know. If you're a Lions fan, you disagree. If you're a Chiefs fan, you agree. I personally thought it was a fumble and out. And, Galladay should have played to the whistle there. He could have got Breeland down, and that ended up really kind of being the difference in the game there. That was the complete momentum shift. Galladay, although he had 2 touchdowns, he could have had 3. He could have made that tackle. Only 5 receptions and 67 yards. But let's be real about this. Galladay's a beast. I think everybody knows that. He's a weekly start. He's going to be hard to pry away from any owner in your league. So from a fantasy football point of view, all I can say is he's worth the buy in daily fantasy. Marvin Jones, only 3 receptions. I mean, basically, Hawkinson, we predicted that he was back in the end zone this week. He got in there. He's going to be out in week 5 with a concussion, but 3 catches, 27 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, this Detroit team, man, I liked everything that they had to do. Kerryon Johnson, I think, is my favorite Lion from a fantasy point of view, and Galladay as well. Marvin Jones, I think, is somebody now that's 2 good games he's strung up together, 77 yards this week. He's somebody that is probably going to be available on waivers. I would say pick him up if you need a receiver. He's worth the flyer. I still prefer Golden Tate coming back or Deshaun Jackson coming back from injury, and Golden Tate's coming back from suspension. But if you're deep and those guys are gone, Marvin Jones, I think, is probably a nice receiver pickup. And I still like Hardman if he's available in your league as well. Outside of that, since Hawkinson's out, you might want to look at a guy like Jesse James, filling in tight ends next week. But there's not a lot else. I still like Ty Johnson, but, he's basically holding Kerryon Johnson's jock at this point. That's kind of a crass way to say it. But, Johnson, as talented as he is, he's just not Kerryon Johnson. Kerryon Johnson, when healthy, is a beast. And we saw him on display this week. Your teams are taking advantage of Kansas City's defense. I mean, they can run the ball and they can throw the ball. So are they a team that can beat New England? I don't know. And they're a team that I think they've had a tough time. They actually haven't covered either game in the last 2 weeks. I don't know that they can perform well against Indianapolis in week 5. Do I think they'll win? Yes, but I think they're kind of struggling. They need to figure out this defense. But Spagnuolo's a good defensive coordinator. I think they will. And let's be real about this. They're 4-0, okay? Another 6 wins. If they go 6-6 for the rest of the season, they end 10-6 and make the playoffs probably. So, I think they'll be fine. They're all primed, and they're trying to make a Super Bowl run. This is a good team that has won 2 games against actually tough opponents here. And I look forward to watching this Indianapolis game because that could be an upset special. I don't think it will be. But if T.Y. Hilton and Marlon Mack can play, and Kansas City or Indianapolis can get that run and that pass game going, I think it's going to be a very similar game to what we saw against Detroit. Now, Kansas City's at home, so that always helps, but it'll be an interesting one. So keep an eye out for that preview when that gets released later in this week. That takes us through this episode. Please help support our channel. All you have to do is subscribe, comment, like, and watch some videos, and that helps us grow. We have a lot of fresh fantasy football, daily fantasy football content, the kind of stuff that's driven by computer analytics and me watching all the games. So it's unlike anything you're going to see on any other channel. If nothing else, you can put us in your rotation and just get some clarity or maybe another opinion on somebody else. So again, subscribe to our channel. We'd appreciate it. That's how we grow this thing, and we want to keep growing and add in more stuff to this channel. We appreciate it, and we'll catch you on another episode. Thanks.